So we'll get started. So I welcome everybody to the 2020 Super Conference, and especially to this session, what managing partners learned or have been learning during COVID-19. We're excited to offer this topic, and we've got a great panel today with Silvia Coulter and 3 member firm managing partners from Europe, South America, and North America. So thank you for attending, and it's my pleasure to introduce Silvia Coulter to you. Silvia and I have known each other for a long time. She is a veteran law firm management consultant, has been very active in the marketing and strategic planning worlds, was actually in Minneapolis, my hometown, for a few years with Dorsey and Whitney, and I met her when she was a consultant at Hildebrandt. When Hildebrandt retired that brand, she started her own firm, LawVision, which is now a very successful and full-service law firm, industry-specific consulting firm. She's also started the Legal Sales and Services Organization, which I went to their conferences for several years. And this last year, she's one of the editors of a book that is now available on Amazon, closely related to the topic that we're covering today. So Silvia, I should mention also that Silvia was involved with a big consulting project that Ally Law took on in the late 2007 to 10, and so she knows our organization better than most. So I'm happy to turn this to Silvia, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Wendy. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're well. We're excited to have this panel, and we have some great managing partners and with some fabulous insights. And so let's get started. Dr. Eszter Kamocsay-Berta is co-founder and the managing partner of Ally Law's Hungarian member firm, KCG Partners. She has 2 decades experience advising clients in a broad range of corporate, commercial, and tax matters. Before starting KCG, Eszter experienced life with several European-based global firms. Mathieu Shapiro is managing partner of Ally Law's Pennsylvania member firm, Obermayer. Mathieu is a seasoned litigator with experience in business, finance, and employment disputes. He's also the first new managing partner in about 30 years. So that's an accomplishment. And he's on his way to Boston after this to pick up his daughter at Tufts University, where she's been held up in her dorm room for a while now because of COVID. And Juan Pablo Cardinal is managing partner and co-founder of Ally Law's Argentina member firm, Richards Cardinal. He leads the firm's technology, media, and telecom and intellectual property practices, a dynamic area in one of the most competitive legal markets on the planet. So welcome, everyone. So I want to start out by saying this continues clearly to be challenging times because of COVID, and we're in sort of like round 2 of lockdowns. Maybe some of us never left round 1. But let's just start with COVID. And how have you been managing the challenges associated with the pandemic, just in general? Mathieu, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, so first of all, good morning, and or good afternoon. It's good to see everybody. And my first response is, I wish we were really doing this in person, where we could do it as a conversation, because I mean, I learned just in our rehearsal from Juan Pablo and Eszter, and I'm sure I could learn other things from everyone who's on this call if we had the opportunity to do that, because I think we're all struggling with figuring out how you deal in a disconnected world. And I think at Obermayer, what we've tried to do more than anything is to view COVID as an opportunity and figure out where the opportunities to increase our flexibility are found, and how to embrace those and lean into those. And so, you know, that starts off with the simple technical stuff. We've all learned how to make our firms work remotely, how to give everybody access to everything wherever they are. And we've certainly had to do that, and that includes worrying about security and worrying about teaching people how to get on a Zoom call, as we were talking about before everybody joined, right? We've actually had to teach people how to get on Zoom. But we've made everything available, and that's certainly part of it. But to me, the biggest challenge / opportunity, yin yang, right, of COVID has been finding ways to capitalize on the lack of connection that I think everybody is feeling. And so that has meant changing the way we talk about group meetings, changing the way we do regular meetings with associates, and how we start those by saying, how are you feeling, right? Forget your hours, forget your work, just how are you feeling? And it means finding ways to connect with clients as well. And so, one of the things that we found is, whereas you couldn't pick up the phone and call clients before because they weren't available, they weren't willing to get on the phone, at various points during the lockdowns, it's been easy to get clients on the phone who you couldn't get on the phone in the past. And so you find different ways to provide the connections. So to me, that I think has been the biggest change and challenge and opportunity, and finding the flexibility to address those things is to me where you have to put down your preconceptions and have an open mind and think about things in a new way, and think about the changes which are going to stick and move forward and make us all better in the long run. How's that? I used to pass it on to someone else.
And Eszter, there's certainly just capitalizing and bouncing off the technology issue. I know depending on the jurisdiction, there are issues that people hadn't thought about that are embedded in one's culture, data privacy, trust issues, and things like that. And we had talked a little bit about that before. What are you finding are the biggest technology challenges as the managing partner of the firm?
First of all, it's very nice to be together, even virtually. And it helps us understand how much better it will be when we will be together in person. And Mathieu made a strong entree, let's put it that way, and summarized it very, very concisely, that this is actually, we consider it as an opportunity to increase resilience of our firm, and in many, many respects. And one of these respects was technology, actually, and we talked about it before. And in this respect, COVID has broken down barriers, but also highlighted weak spots. We all learned to work remotely. It was we have really a growing sophistication in using technological devices. It's increased efficiency, it's increased cost effectiveness. It's actually changed our attitude to our team members, because we were forced to develop trust, actually, because our colleagues were not here. It was impossible to be in personal contact, to monitor on one side, and to manifest on the other side from the team member sides. So we had to develop trust, and we had to develop autonomy, and we had to develop independent work. So that's all the where we really capitalized on this breakdown, and where we see an opportunity and a new way of working together. On the other hand, as we realized and we experienced that teamwork and collaboration were becoming limited. There were much less human communication and less human interaction. And it's actually has been affected the way how we work together. In addition to cybersecurity questions, data protection questions, where we had to develop protocols, how deal with that, how to comply, first of all, with the legal provisions, but on the other hand, on the increased liability attached to our profession in terms of confidentiality. And just to make it once simple, when people, our colleagues, when we are working from home, so how to keep the confidentiality, how to protect secrets, so what physical measures need to be done, and how the technological channels need to be protected in order to prevent leakage of information. So there were many questions we had to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Juan, Pablo, just bouncing off that, what do you think are the most important areas you as a managing partner need to emphasize in terms of collaboration, continuing to build team, despite the fact we're not all present in one spot, but again, with multiple offices, if any of your firms have multiple offices or any, that's always been a challenge, right? And so maybe this is a new opportunity for people who aren't on the same floor or aren't in the same space anyway.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm based in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. For you to know, I think Argentina has the longest lockdown in this COVID-19. So we've been locked down as from March till a couple of weeks ago. So it was really tough in terms of how to react and how to survive, let's put it that way. Interesting things. It's interesting what you were saying. For me, one of the key issues was that was a test on how to adapt to uncertain circumstances all the time, from day one, and for management, for the law firm as itself, for the lawyers, for clients, for staff. Everybody was trying, we were just adapting to incredibly new circumstances. We never thought that from a week to another will be 100% online, the law firm, keeping working, keeping all the operations, facing all the challenges that we need to face. So one of the big lessons for me was to deal with certain uncertainties that we never thought they will come. And I don't know if we are a good example for your specific question, because we are a single site law firm, so we don't have that kind of issues of keeping the bonding, but really was for us that we don't have that problems, because we were used to be the 50 lawyers all in the same building, to be aside and not having personal interrelation on a daily basis was really a challenge. We tried to solve it with technology, with meetings, but it wasn't the same. So we start muting or changing the way we relates. And for example, we end up having one-to-one meetings just to know exactly, well, what's going on with that kind of people, or a net of people saying, of a lawyer saying, look, this one really is not performing well, but not as an issue of performance, but as an indicator that perhaps something was going wrong at home or were facing tough times. So we try to monitor as close as we can every single one to see and to continue the relationship. But it was really, that was a key factor and one of the most complicated ones.
So what do you think has made you all a better managing partner as a result of this?
I'm not sure I'm a better managing partner now. But I'm sure that I face things that I never thought I would face in my life, like caring about how to do with medical issues or how to deal with them, these kind of things that we were not used to, or writing bio protocols on how to come back to the law firms and what you have to do, this kind of thing that were new. I think we learn a lot in many areas, how to handle, yes, how to manage a law firm, but I don't know if that's meaning that I'm better now.
Mm-hmm. Well, like Matthew, it connects you more with the people side of your firm, right? I mean, we're always all about the numbers and the revenue and the cost and the overhead and all those things that we're consumed with in law firm management. But, you know, maybe not so much on the people side. So what's changed?
Yeah,
What will stick?
I think certainly managing through the pandemic puts a premium on emotional intelligence, or whatever you want to call that. And I'll just give as one example. We have, and I could run through several of these examples, but if you have an associate whose wife works in an emergency room and who has small kids in the house, he's gonna, and so no one will come to the house or take the kids to watch them.
Mm-hmm.
That associate's gonna have a lot of trouble finding the time to bill hours. And so you have to work with that. I mean, you know, it's someone who's part of the family, who you care, part of the firm family that you care about. And you have to find ways to work with that person to figure out how to keep that person as productive as possible. But that's where you need to get on the phone with everyone and say, how are you doing? Right, I said this before. Say, how are you doing first? Forget all of what we think
Mm-hmm,
of the business stuff. How are you doing first? And I do hope that stays. I hope that premium on the emotional, on reaching out to more than the numbers, I hope that stays. I think, you know, one of the other things that, and I'm not sure if this quite answers, and I don't know whether this stays or not, but it's an interesting thing, particularly on this Zoom. I think we've all found that schedules no longer have start and stop points in the way they used to, right? Because we all wake up and our office is 2 seconds away, either right downstairs or down the hall or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's less of a sense that the day ends whenever the day ends, or that you ever go home, or that weekends exist. I mean, we've lost all sense of those normal time markers of at work and not at work, because we're always at home and always at work too much of the time now. And I don't know how that plays out. It's been helpful for us with our international clients, right? I know people who have said, oh, it's really easy to do those nighttime calls with wherever now, or the early morning calls, because the schedule has changed. So I don't know how that plays out. And I don't know if that's good or bad when you also think about the emotional side of it, right? It's tough to be on call all the time for our clients, our colleagues, our connections.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's helpful for the people who are trying to get you. So
we have someone from chat saying we've all adopted in order to survive, but building of trust needs, in her opinion, eye contact, body language, sharing energy in a room. These do not go through the screen. So post-COVID, will the new communication habits survive or prove to be that they do not serve our law firm needs? But again, you know, before you answer that, I would say, you know, that's when we're all in one place and we have presence. But that hasn't been the case for many, many firms for a long time. As firms become more global, expand, have alliances, right, with one another to work on big projects, we're not face to face. And so this, you know, maybe it's something we have to adapt. Or what do you think, Eszter? This is, you know, it's going to continue to be a challenge, I believe, post-COVID, because now the door's been open to remote workforces, and some people find it easier. They may work more, they may work different hours to get the work done.
Yeah, COVID forced us to react more flexible. So flexibility, I think that's the key word, and understanding. I completely agree with my co-panelists saying that the human side is somehow getting more and more important. And maybe it's the eye contact. I'm not sure. Just to paying attention to the circumstances, embracing reality. That's reality. We have to deal with that. So we can turn it however we want. That's what life is for the time being, and we have to adapt to that. And listening to each other and caring for each other, because it's a serious thing. It's about life. So it's not something that we can take easy. And for me, it was very, very important that there was no, as a leader of a firm, in a situation that we have never experienced before, not even our parents have experienced this before. There were no best practices, no good strategy. So it was a situation there, and we have to work it out, how we will work together, how we will keep conducting business, how we will in order to keep up the operation. So, and it was absolutely not working for directing it from top to the down, because there was, but it's very, very important that everybody has a role, everybody plays a role, and everybody can make an impact. So by contributing, what the solution will be. And just for me, that's new, sorry to say, a new experience, let's put it that way, that this interdependency, that building up something in a completely new situation, when there are no best practices ever. Of course, there are key points, key indicators, so we are not coming from nothing, but still, for me, maybe that was a completely new vision, or a new perspective opened up due to the COVID.
So one thing that hasn't changed through COVID is that the legal industry, to some extent, is what we would call a mature industry, right? And there has been an increase in the competition, demand for legal services globally, according to the most recent Acritas and Thomson Reuters studies. Demand is flat, maybe even down like 0.001%. And so retention and growth of existing clients and acquisition of new clients is critical to maintain where we are. And yet, the ALSP, alternative legal service providers, the big four accounting firms, the companies building and taking, parts to e-discovery and all the other pieces of what once was part of the practice of law away, right? So some erosion on the services. So we can't take our foot off the gas. Even though COVID is a major disruption, it's something we have to deal with every single day. So what are you doing to stay focused on strategic objectives, and maybe, adapt a bit in terms of, given COVID, but, nevertheless, we've got to stay focused on driving forward as well. So what advice do you have for our audience, or what are some of the things you're doing?
So one of the things I kind of think about is Colin Powell, for those who, I don't know if people outside of America remember him, but a very well-known general, was one of my favorite sayings, that he says, if you had 40% of the information needed to make a decision, for instance, about how to do strategic planning going forward, that isn't enough yet. But if you wait until you have 70% of the information you need, you probably waited too long, right? And so we're constantly, or at least I'm constantly thinking about where you find that sweet spot between the 40 and the 70, where you have enough information and you're still moving early enough to be effective. And so I think in COVID, I think about that a lot. So one of the things everyone kind of says anecdotally, well, real estate's going to be a problem. Nobody's in their offices anymore. We don't need as much space. I don't feel like I'm at the 40% yet on space, right? Talk to me after these vaccines actually come out and we see what they do and they see where we are. And on top of that, I have a lease term that I have to deal with anyway. So in terms of space, I don't feel like I'm there yet. What we have tried to focus on as we go forward is the things where we do have enough information already and we know COVID doesn't impact them. So one of the ones we talked about before and that we're really focused on, and in America it's been very topical over the past summer, is diversity. Now, we were already focused on diversity, but that's one that COVID to me has nothing to do with the fact that we are embracing looking for ways to be more diverse as a firm, to match the very diverse city that we live in, to recruit, to have town halls about the kind of racial issues that are in the news, which is part of the connection. It's part of keeping people together. It's also something that I think is important to our clients, and we can talk to our clients about what we're doing. So to me, that's a place that we're over the 40 and hopefully not yet at the 70, though I think most people are embracing, kind of the need to be more diverse at this point. But that's where I try to think as we're talking about changes. What do we do where we have enough information already to move forward?
Mm-hmm.
Well, on the same topic, here we are in the wave 1 of the COVID still. We haven't had yet our summer and move to another wave. So my point, and going to the 40-70 that Mathieu was saying, is we are still too much infected of COVID in terms of decision making. So everybody's saying the real estate, yes, we should get them all and have a PO box, and that's it, because we will be online our entire life. Well, that's too much. Let's think what will be the aftermath. Home office, yes, that's fantastic. Everybody wants to be at home. You don't need anything else. Well, no, there are certain people that now are seeing that to be in the office is better, that they can go away from the issues at home and whatever. So in my view, at least, we are still infected of COVID issues. To have a clear mind and think 5 years terms or 10 years term for a real estate, or what will be the policies for home office from now on, and this kind of thing. So we are still, my view is we are still in the middle of the problem. So it's quite difficult to get the head out of that.
Right. So let's take COVID out of the picture. I know it's very difficult to do, but let's take COVID out of the picture. How are we staying competitive? What are we doing to stay competitive? What are we doing to retain and grow clients? How have we improved, or what are we doing to help our partners bring in new business, keep existing clients, keep service levels as high as possible, offer strategic alternatives on pricing strategies and service delivery models? So what are we doing because we still have a practice of law, right? We still have a business we're running. So what's happening in those areas?
What we need to say that actually the client is the driver of our business. So the client demands and the client needs is the one that shapes actually our services and the way how we provide services. And that has actually changed due to COVID abruptly, but in general. And COVID helped us to understand that just to how important it is to stay as close as possible to the client, to understand the need of the client, get as many information as possible from the client in order to be able to service the client better. We have seen a drop of demand in some fields, but an increase of demand in other fields. So employment, for example, or governmental regulations, or the restructurings. We got a lot of mandates in this respect. In other fields, like transactional advice is not in demand for the time being. We have to realize that, and we have to adopt that. So the client staying close to the client is very, very important for the time being, because it's really difficult to develop new client relationships. So we work on the existing one, but we also make better use of the knowledge, of the data, what we have. Actually, we have accumulated a lot of data, and we have very recently, in the last years, developed a data-based pricing system, a data-based monitoring system, where we are able to monitor the profitability in terms of the clients, in terms of the matters, in terms of our colleagues. So these are very, very important information, what we can get, actually real time. And it is a competitive advantage. It gives us a competitive advantage, all these insights and information, what we get. So we actually know what is in terms of pricing, what is impossible to go under, unless we want to enter a new industry, how to, where is the profitability margin, what we are willing to offer, what we are not willing to offer. Really fantastic new opportunities that makes us much more aware how much information we actually have and we don't use, or we have not used it before. And now we are forced to use this information, for example.
Right. And Matthew, you said earlier, this has, you know, there's an increase, and I think we've heard this a lot, right? That there's an increase in client communications. Clients tell us that, you know, we used to get 30 to 70 alerts a week. Now we get, you know, well over 100 to 200 a week from firms. And so how are we differentiating? What's our strategic way to differentiate us from our competitors? And I guess to some extent, COVID has caused us to focus on that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything right now it just leads back to COVID, because one of the things that we tell our people to do and we think is really important is you get to know your clients, you get to know what's going on in their lives. And so right now, it's in some way with existing clients, and new clients is a whole different thing right now, but with existing clients, I think the ability to reach out and say, what is different? What's going on in your life and your business because of, and you don't even have to say because of COVID, because the answer is going to be the things that are different because of COVID. And so, one of the things we've done a couple of different, and this is repeating a little bit, but we've done a couple of different programs designed to train our lawyers in listening / emotional intelligence / this. And some of them have gone over better than others, because we're all learning as we go along and finding things that work and don't work. But it's trying to train lawyers to learn how to listen in this format on Zoom, which is hard. And I'll say one other thing, because someone mentioned this earlier. About how do you judge, how do you see when you can't see people eye to eye and you can't shake hands and all of that stuff. I had the experience a couple months ago of having 2 live testimony hearings in back-to-back weeks. I'm sorry, if I say live, let me be more clear. I had hearings in back-to-back weeks. One was actually live. It was in a courtroom, and the other one was on Zoom or an equivalent platform. And for the live one, we were in the courtroom. There were multiple parties, and we were all behind our own plexiglass. You had to register as you walked in, and each set of counsel, you were allowed 2 people, one 6 feet behind the other person, behind your own plexiglass thing with a computer screen right in front of you. And the judge was up front, and I think the judge couldn't hear some of us through all of the plexiglass, and the witness was all the way off on my left. And while I wasn't as far to the right as the furthest seat in the room, if you were on the furthest seat in the room to the right, you were looking at the witness through, we counted about 6 different layers of plexiglass with their seams that you had to kind of duck around and look at. And that was really hard. And in contrast, the next week, when we did it on Zoom, whenever the witness was on, the court was running the platform, and the witness came up right here on my computer screen with the witness's face full screen. Now, was it as good as being in person across the desk from someone in a deposition or in a courtroom where I could walk around and talk and, you know, cross-examine? No, it wasn't. Was it better than through the plexiglass in person? 1,000 times, I thought. And I think everyone else who I talked to had that same experience. So again, there's a lot of learning involved here, and there's a lot of figuring out what works and where you can make, again, connections is the word that we keep coming up, connections and flexibility, and a lot of learning, and some surprises along the way, and being open-minded enough to realize that Zoom actually was better than being in person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you know, again, another potential threat, right? So one of the things about the 40/70 is what are, and strategic planning, what are the potential threats? So a potential threat could be, I might have more competitors who can now practice in my jurisdiction because they can do it virtually, and that's accepted in the courts, or it's accepted in certain jurisdictions. One thing we've seen, and there have been a number of comments about this on various webinars I've listened to, and maybe some of you have all listened to this too, is there are some global firms having a field day, cherry picking partners from other jurisdictions, other firms, because now they're saying what was once a barrier, which was, I'm not going to move my family. I'd love to come work for you. I'd love the opportunity, but I'm not going to move my family from Philadelphia to the UK, or from, you know, Philadelphia to San Jose, California. And now these global firms are saying, you could stay wherever you want. And so there's been actually a lot of movement in the lateral market that we've seen for some very high-end individuals, and therefore the clients are going, which has been an issue in the past with laterals. So, you know, so there's a couple of threats, right? Competitors coming in because they can practice locally through Zoom or WebEx or whatever they might choose. Competitive threats to the global firms coming into local jurisdictions, which has remained a threat, and maybe more so now, who knows, we'll see. But what are you seeing, Juan Pablo, in those situations?
Well, it's strange. From one side, you have that, for example, at least in Argentina, you have very little movement, very little attrition at the law firm. I think we lost one single, I think it was a paralegal even, not even a lawyer, that went away. And there is very little movement between law firms in Argentina. So this year, what was a very high market, very popular market to move a lot, you know, millennials and this kind of stuff, that they change a lot. This year was very quiet, so you didn't have that issue. And on the other side, what you were saying is, Mathieu was giving an example of court work, but in transactional work, in negotiation of contracts and things of the like, what you were describing is now maximizing a lot. Why? Because a guy in England can be negotiating through Zoom an agreement for a mine company in Chile, perhaps with someone local helping them in local issues, regulatory issues, or things of the like, but they will have they will have someone from another jurisdiction working on that. International M&As also, you will have a guy from, I don't know, San Francisco monitoring buying of a company in many jurisdictions, and they can do it more easily than they do it before. That's not new, I know that, but now they can take more and more work from the local one. For example, you are by a company, you have a virtual data room, you can go in there and say, well, look, all the contracts will be seen by someone other than you because they are all the same, they're standard and whatever. Those kind of work prior to this kind of methodology, or prior to COVID, if you want, they were related to the local law firms. So you have there someone that is taking away from you certain work that generally speaking was yours. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So again, with this movement and an ability to perhaps, we've adapted or are adapting and embracing technology as a competitive advantage in even different ways now, right? Not only in the preparation and delivery of the services, but in servicing clients. What would you say are one or two key things everybody should be aware of? What are you focused on strategically as a result of all that? Eszter, do you want to weigh in here?
For me, it's a little bit difficult from the European perspective to relate to this, to be honest, because compared to the US or compared to Latin America, Europe is very, very structured. It's a structured market, lots of countries. And for the time being, we experience that cross-border work is completely broken down. So European countries are struggling with the virus, with the pandemic, and borders have been closed and supply chains have been broken down. So it's, for the time being, it's not, to be honest, we have not really been faced with global mobilization.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe before the time and after COVID, and there will be a new perspective opened up here, because COVID showed that especially in transactional work, as Juan Pablo mentioned, that it's completely relevant, and that there are no impediments in this respect. But for the time being, with special respect to the fact that European countries are very protective in this way. So me as a lawyer qualified under Hungarian law, I'm very much limited in my exercising my profession, for example, in other European countries, and the other ways around, vice versa. So there, we still see here a protection of the market, even if the legal market. And my expectation is that that will be a trend and remain a trend in the close future. Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, it's amazing how that issue or this topic it can be very localized based on jurisdiction, right? And that's not always the case when we look at, say, for example, the UK firms, the big global accounting firms, and where they're starting to spread and kind of their tentacles are reaching, right? So something to be really aware of. I would say, I would love to open this up for questions if anyone has any questions. What's the best piece of advice? Two things. What's the biggest thing you've learned? And what's the best piece of advice to stay in control and focus through all of this? Mathieu, what do you think?
I already gave my best piece of advice. It's the 40-70 that I try to live by. And honestly, every now and then some of the partners will come to me or other members of the management committee or our COO and say, you guys are doing such a good job. You've got such foresight. You're planning around all of this. And my reaction is usually to almost laugh at them. And I'll tell everyone the truth. I feel like when I was 12 years old, 13 years old, I had a summer job every summer at the Donut Shack on Cape Cod. And I went out there one summer and they had opened a deli next door. And they asked me to work at the deli for one day, the first day I got there for the summer. And I went over there, and at the end of the day, they fired the woman who had been running this tiny little deli, and they put me in charge of the deli for the rest of the summer. And I had no clue what I was doing. And I had to figure out how much meat to pre-slice, how much bread to order, where and how to order the produce for the next day. So I had lettuce and tomatoes to put on the sandwiches. I had to figure it all out as we were going along day to day. And that to me is what managing through COVID is. So, there's no, it's not a single thing that anyone figures out. It's it's being open enough to listen. I mean, it's all the same things I think that go with management all the time. It's being open enough to listen and receive advice and take new things and move forward with them, and figure out which ones work and don't work, and not be tied down. I mean, we've certainly tried things that haven't worked during the pandemic that we did for a week or two and we got rid of, because it was dumb. I mean, you know, and even a simple example, when we first came back into our office, we put big orange traffic cones out in the hallways. And the concept was we didn't want to be like the supermarkets, at least in America, where like one aisle of the supermarket goes this way and one aisle goes this way, right? And everybody yells at you if you go the wrong way, even though you didn't notice. And we didn't want to do that in our office because it wouldn't work for the flow. But we did want people to be careful going around corners and not run into each other. So we put these big orange cones out, and they looked a little bit stupid, truth be told. And we've since removed the cones because people weren't running into each other going around the corner. Now, having said that, they did remind me to wash my hands more often. And so like, I actually want something back that will remind me in the same way to wash my hands every time I leave my office and come back to my office. So I don't know if that answered the question, but it's looking at how things work and don't work, and what people really are doing.
I agree with Matthew. That's pretty much the same answer that I will give you. I don't think there is one thing that you could stay flexible. You will have to deal with things that you never think you had to deal with, and try and keep to the basic. At a certain point, you have to say to all the people, look, we have to continue working, you have to continue delivering, you have to continue charging, you have to continue having a relationship with your client, with your coworker. So at a certain point, you have to go back and say, we have to continue the ship going forward.
Right. Yeah.
I shared all this, what you have mentioned, and I would like to add that there is this wonderful song or saying from Frank Sinatra that if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And in analogy, if we can manage this, we can manage everything. So it's really what actually COVID made me realize how important firm culture is, because things they're outside in the business, we cannot control them. So it's the awareness how little control we have. What we can control is actually how we relate to that, and how we react to that, and what solution we find together. That's what we can do. And there is no good way to set technicalities, how to manage this situation or that situation. But if we have sound values and integrity, then we will manage it somehow. So probably in a good way. And for me, the learning was that must be strong, and much more focus put on that, as we used to do it before. Yeah.
You know, we have so many managing partners listening. I would love everybody to unmute and provide just their own perspective on, you know, what's the most challenging thing you have to overcome? How are you staying focused on strategy? This is a great opportunity for managing partners, right? Because being a leader means, and partners may think they don't need to be led, let's face it, but everybody wants to know what the rules of the game are. And so you have an opportunity that's incredible to really define that. So I'd love to hear from some of the managing partners who are attending this session as well.
Silvia, this is Tony O'Malley at Voorhees in Cleveland. One of the things that's been at top of mind at our firm is the inability to impart soft skills on our associates. The things that you learn by watching lawyers, being down the hall. How does, Bill Smith return a phone call? How does, Jane Jones conduct a meeting? And, we don't think it's fatal, but we can feel that, you know, some of our youngsters, say years 1 to 5, have lost a year of development, you know, where we all learned how to become professionals and lawyers and partners, really probably by modeling ourselves after people we respected and grew up with. So that's one of the big things we've been talking about quite a bit at the firm is, as COVID passes, we hope, how do we re-engage people and make up for lost time?
Yeah, Tony, I agree with that entirely. The lack of the figuring out how to mentor remotely is really hard. And I think it's two things, because it's not just that associates are not sitting next to partners as they're learning to do something, but it's equally, one of the things that we found is our partners have the feeling of, it is easier for me to just do the work myself than it is to give it to the associates, because to give the work to the associate requires getting them on the phone or on Zoom. It requires getting materials to them. And all of that has become so much more, I don't know if I want to say complicated, but it's just more of a hassle. It's more time consuming. And so partners keep work, and that retards the associate development equally. So we're constantly pushing people to get over that and still push the work out.
But, you know, again, this is a challenge when you think about it, that firms with various offices, various floors, you know, face anyway. So I think in some ways, do you see it, Tony, as an opportunity to figure out, how do we do this better in the future, regardless of COVID?
Yeah, it's actually running, just coincidentally at our firm, it's running parallel with an integration collaboration effort we launched about 18 months ago to marry up our offices and our groups, you know, and work across. And so that will merge, you know, at some point. But I think we have a significant component of people who are expressing a desire to remain remote permanently, which surprised me candidly. And so I guess what we're thinking, aside from the cross office, just how, you know, you still need, at least the bias and the experience of baby boomers is that you still need some interpersonal connection to really grow and thrive. So that's, I think they are interrelated, but they're a little bit delinked just on the development side.
Any other managing partners want to just provide some insight?
Well, actually, hi, it's Russel Shear in London here. I just had a question that I wanted to put to the panel about staff incentivization. So, you know, how has the panel dealt with in circumstances where, you know, some firms have seen quite a big drop off in revenue? How have you continued to try and incentivize staff, for example, bonus schemes, etc.? For example, we have reduced budgets, you know, proportionately to reflect the effect of COVID. Have you continued with the kind of normal schemes and incentivization programs that you have in place, or have you had to adapt to that, or how have you dealt with it?
Hi, here in Argentina, still we keep all the programs that we had before. We never had the need to change anything. We continue with the bonus end of the year and this kinds of programs. Also in Argentina, we have something which is very particular. We have a very high inflation, so you have to give 3 times a year or 4 times a year. You have to give raises just to catch up on inflation, these kind of things. So far, we keep up with all that, and we are not planning so far to change that.
We also don't have any current plan to change it. I mean, if we get to the end of the year and see something that's an anomaly, we might, but to the extent we've probably had a very small revenue drop off, not that large, and it's probably about equal to the expense drop off that we've had. So I think we'll end up in the same place come year end. And I think certainly our intention right now is to stick with the same structure that we have.
It's the same with us, that we haven't changed anything, and for the time being, we don't have the intention to change. First, we check what happened actually in 2020, but nevertheless, what I see with clients, that there is a trend to move in direction of more flexible remunerations. So not to have this big cost to carry on, but to restructure in a way that the salaries, that there is a fixed salary, there is a performance-based part of the salary that is obviously conditional on the performance. And it allows the firm, allows the client to adjust more. There is more flexibility in situations like this, for example. So there is obviously, we have seen that, we are seeing that as a trend to come. Definitely.
Yeah, I think part of the difficulty from my perspective is, as you mentioned, some parts of the practice have dropped off, like transactional work, for example. So it's difficult for those fee earners that have less work to do to be able to hit those sort of targets which they would otherwise have done. So other members of the firm who are in sort of thriving groups like litigation, for example, have a much better chance of hitting those targets. So, you know, the difficulty is trying to keep those people that are not busy incentivized and actively involved. I guess that's the difficulty.
So I want to say thank you to our panelists and for all of you who attended the session today. I think it's, you know, absolutely panelists are open to you emailing them and continuing the conversation if you have some other specific questions. And panelists, thank you so much for your insights and thoughts. And I wish everybody a great day, great evening, and have a good rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.